happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed. Tune in to Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, and join the conversation about how to heal our broken system to reverse our current health crisis. The entire world is looking for answers, and the truth is hidden in plain sight. Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, when you can call in and ask the questions that matter most to you.
We're live.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and this is Awakened Wellness, where we'll be going on an eye-opening, mind-expanding adventure into disease prevention and wellness. And today, the disease we're talking about is cancer. So cancer prevention is what we're dealing with today. Last podcast, we talked a little bit about prevention and what cancer actually is. And today we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into how to prevent it. We toss the word cancer prevention around a lot, but there really isn't a plan, right? When we go to our physician's office for our annual exams, there really is no discussion of prevention. And that, unfortunately, is why we're seeing ever increasing rates of cancer in our communities and globally. So it is unfortunately predicted that 42% of Americans will have cancer by the year 2025. And that's 4 out of every 10 people that you see in the street will have had a cancer diagnosis. And that's alarming, right? And people think, well, cancer's been around forever, so that's just how it is. But no, that's not really necessarily true. It's partly true that cancer has been around forever. So if we go back to ancient texts and we look in historical textbooks around the world, we see references to things, conditions that are described that we could equate to what we call cancer today. So we have reference to tumors and masses and things like that are deadly in the historical literature. So we know cancer is not a new disease. Autism is a new disease, right? If we go back in historical textbooks, you won't find anything that sounds like autism in any description until the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Cancer is different. We do see that in the historical texts. But what's alarming is the rate of cancer. So cancer has exploded over the past 50, 60, 70 years. And that's what's alarming. And the idea that cancer's been around forever and, if you live long enough, you should expect to get cancer is flawed. It's not true. And today we'll be discussing why it's not true and what we can do to prevent this condition. Again, in the allopathic medical model, prevention is not used in the right way. The word itself, prevention, is used incorrectly. When we say I'm going to go get my preventive annual exam, there's really nothing preventive about it, right? We're going to look at, oh, sorry, my hair is causing scratchy sounds. Okay, thank you, Rachel. Is that better? All right, sorry about that. So when we go to the physician's office to get our prevention exam, our preventive exam, what we're getting is really an early diagnosis exam, right? We are having, of course, a physical exam done. We're getting our blood work. And if we're women of a certain age, we're getting our pap smears and pelvic exams and breast exams. And if we are of another certain age, we're getting mammograms and colonoscopies. Men, when they come of a certain age, are getting prostate exams and colonoscopies as well. And when we look at what those tests are, they are not prevention tests, right? They don't prevent anything from happening. and if we really look at what they are preventing, if we're going to call it prevention, we would have to say that they're preventing death, right? They're not preventing the disease. And when we have a model that calls prevention the prevention of death from disease, what happens is we start to get an avalanche of diseases because we're not focused on preventing the disease. And that's what's happening today. We have an avalanche of chronic diseases just coming at us because we have never really focused on preventing disease. We have always focused on preventing death from disease. And if you don't prevent something, you'll get more and more of it, right? And then there's also an assumption that, well, if I eat right and I exercise, I should be fine. And while that may have been true before the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, it's no longer true because the Industrial Revolution has changed the rules of the game. We now live in a very toxic environment that defaults to disease if we don't do things that are frankly quite drastic to prevent the diseases. So when we look at the air, it still looks kind of clean, right? We don't see particles unless you live in LA or something. The air looks pretty clean. If we look at our water, it still looks fairly clear and blue. If we look at the soil, it still looks like it's always looked. But that's because our eyes and our noses are flawed, right? They're not sensitive enough to pick up the millions, if not billions, of toxins that are in them. So we have to use other instruments. If we look at our soil under a microscope and we analyze our soil, we see that it's devoid of minerals and it's full of pesticides and heavy metals. We see a lot of arsenic and mercury, aluminum in our soil today. If we look at our water with a microscope and we analyze with testing, we will see mercury and other heavy metals, arsenic in particular, in our water. We will see, again, pesticides from the soil leaking into the water system and things like that. The air quality, if we were to analyze it, we would see toxins just kind of floating around in our environment. We would also see EMF radiation, coming through. If we had sensitive enough instruments that could show us these things, that's what we would see. But because we're using our eyes and our ears and our noses, it's not evident to us. But it is very evident to our cells. So on the inside of us, our cells are super tiny. They're microscopic. We can't see them with the naked eye. So a toxin to them is huge. To us as a body, we don't even see them. We don't smell them. We don't think they're around unless we investigate, right? To the cell, they know that they're around because they're huge to the cell. So everything's relative, right? And if we're going to prevent cancer, we have to look at it from the level of the cell, because looking at it grossly, we don't know what to treat. We don't know we don't really know what's going on. Grossly, we have to go in at the level of the cell. So we talked a little bit about what cancer is on the last show. And cancer is essentially a metabolic catastrophe that happens inside the body that occurs when the body is unable to make and use its own energy using oxygen. And so just like we breathe, we take air in through our nostrils, our cells also breathe. So on a cellular level inside your cells are actually breathing. And we call this aerobic respiration. And that is the most important step in energy production inside the human cell, is to make sure the cell actually breathes. And what does that mean? It means that the cell takes in oxygen. So we can inhale oxygen. That doesn't mean the cells get the oxygen, right? And we saw that with COVID very blatantly, right? We were pumping oxygen into people, and yet it wasn't going inside their cells. Cancer is very similar. The cell loses its ability to take in oxygen or to breathe. And so what causes that is nutrient deficiencies inside the cell. So it's like a chicken and egg game inside the cells. They're very interdependent on multiple systems to function in order for them to get the oxygen they need and the nutrients they need within themselves in order for the metabolic reactions to occur. And by metabolic reactions, what I mean is all of the chemical reactions that take place inside the cells so they can work and function and do the things they do. So your eye cell, for example, its metabolic functions are to create energy so that you can see. You can see in the dark, you have night vision, you can see color, you can see shades of gray, you can see rapid motion. Rapid motion is a survival mechanism that the body has built into itself, and your eyes allow you to see rapid motion. Also, the lubrication of your eye is a metabolic function of your eye cells. So every single cell in your eye has to undergo these chemical reactions in order for you to see properly. Otherwise, your vision deteriorates. And it's the same thing inside every single cell in your body. So they have all these metabolic functions. So cancer is a metabolic catastrophe. Everything just stops working in the area where the tumor is forming. Because in that area, for some reason, those cells were not able to have the nutrients within themselves that they needed in order to pull the oxygen in to make energy to power their function. And when that happens, your body has a backup system so those cells don't just die. So they turn on certain genes. Those genes will then turn on kind of backup mechanisms to allow the body to function without very much oxygen. Unfortunately, that also triggers a bunch of other genes that lead to a cancer diagnosis within those cells. And so that's what cancer actually is. And we talked a lot about why cancer is not genetic, right? It's metabolic, it's environmental, it's what is called epigenetic. It's the environment around the genes that broke, right? The cell was not able to take in oxygen. It did not have the nutrients, and that's why it triggered the gene that led to the genetic damage that caused the cancer. And so that's really important to know if we're going to really believe that cancer is preventable. Because if we believe that cancer is genetic and whatever genes I was born with is going to dictate whether or not I get cancer, we will not believe that it's preventable, right? We will think that we're destined either to get cancer or not. And so it's really important for people to understand that no, cancer is not genetic, and yes, it is preventable. We've had, very reputable academic institutions come out with papers to say that cancer is just a roll of the dice. It depends on what genes you got. And it's just not true. It's just not true. When we look at the scientific literature, we can see that that's not true. We can understand what cancer really is. And yes, it's a gene that eventually broke, but there's a whole trail that led to that broken gene that if you can correct, you will not break the gene, right? And that's what we're going to focus on today. So we're live here on Dream Vision 7 Radio. Our number is area code 646-558-8656. Our meeting ID is 883-695-3587. And please hit *9 to ask any questions that you may have. I'd love to hear from you. All right. We'll be on the lookout for any questions through the chat or by phone. So feel free to give us a call. So we now know what the cause of cancer is, right? It's a metabolic disaster that occurs in the body. So what leads to that metabolic disaster? So what causes the body to be nutrient deficient is really the first question we want to ask if we want to prevent cancer. So there are a few things that do that. One is you're not taking in enough nutrients, right? So your diet is obviously extremely important, whether or not you're eating the right foods. And a healthy, balanced diet is critical for prevention of any disease and is the linchpin of good health. So, eliminating processed sugars, eliminating trans fats, and eating organically as much as possible. And yes, the organic food supply is not the cleanest. Our organic regulations here in the United States are quite lax as compared to other countries. And so, it's not perfect, but it is better than non-organic food. You have less junk to get rid of when you eat organic than when you don't. And so, pesticide-free organic food. Your protein sources have to also be as squeaky clean as possible. We have made our food toxic, and that's what's making us sick too. So giving our animals hormones to make them fatter, giving them antibiotics so they don't get sick. All these things have degraded our food quality. And so it's important that we eat foods that are, free range, grass-fed and grass-finished meats. Our poultry should not be given antibiotics. Our poultry should not be given hormones. Our beef should not be given hormones and antibiotics either. So we have to make sure that, we're a bit of a detective, making sure we really look and read labels and investigate our food sources to know that as much as possible, what's going in is clean. Our vegetables and our fruits should be organic. We have plenty of evidence to show that the pesticide residue on fruits and vegetables is devastating. And so the Environmental Working Group puts out the Dirty Dozen every year, the top 12 most toxic fruits and vegetables, with strawberries seemingly always on top of that list as the most toxic fruit due to the pesticide residue on the surface and inside of the strawberry. So pesticides are not on the surface, right? People make the assumption that, well, if I take the skin off, I'll be fine. But no, the pesticides on the soil, which grows into the fruit. So you're not safe if you just take the skin off. So you have to be very careful in selecting your fruits and vegetables. And the Environmental Working Group is a great source. They also have, on a more positive side, the Clean 15, which tell you the 15 cleanest, fruits and vegetables to eat as well, that have the least amount of pesticide. And so that's important, what you eat. Tons of water. We are always on the run, and it's difficult to get enough water into the body, but water is a very critical ingredient in the diet that's often left out. We often talk about our carbs and our proteins and our fats, but water is, in my opinion, another food group. We have to make sure that we drink a lot of water. So diet. And if we don't eat right, obviously we're going to have malnourishment and we will have vitamin deficiencies. Another thing is to vary the diet. So we're all creatures of habit, right? We either have the oatmeal and egg whites every morning or the omelet every morning with little variants. And what that does is that kind of pigeonholes you into having the same vitamins and minerals every morning. And if your diet isn't complete, right? If you have some gaps in your diet, that you're not covering certain vitamins and minerals, and you're, a creature of habit, as we all are, you're going to have vitamin deficiencies. So you'll be eating good, healthy food, but you'll still be deficient because your diet isn't varied enough. So it's really important to have a huge variety of fruits and vegetables, a huge variety of different types of good fats, and a huge variety of different types of proteins. So that if you, missed enough vitamin B12 on Monday, you'll get it on Tuesday, and you won't have these chronic deficiencies that lead to diseases down the road. So variety of diet's extremely important. And the other issue is the gastrointestinal system. If your gastrointestinal system is not allowing the foods to get through, then you will have nutrient deficiencies, no matter how varied and no matter how healthy your diet is. And so looking at the gastrointestinal system is probably the most important aspect of cancer prevention that we have. And the reason for that is because the gastrointestinal system is directly exposed to the environment. So of course our skin, is our barrier to the environment on a physical level. But we have holes in our skin, right, where we have mucous membranes, and when we breathe, things go right into the body. When we eat, things go directly into the body. And so there are direct access points into the gastrointestinal system. And so as we're exposed to toxins and other things in our food and air and water, those things access directly the gastrointestinal system, directly damaging it. And so it's really important to look at the gastrointestinal system in a different way than we're used to looking at it in our regular medical model. We don't really take a look at the gastrointestinal system in allopathic medicine until someone has significant gastrointestinal symptoms, and or reach a certain age where they're due for their screening tests, such as our colonoscopies that we do, typically starting at the age of 50 for most people at low risk. And so by the time someone has a symptom, they have had an issue for quite some time. And so in the field of integrative medicine, we look at things very differently, and we look at the cellular environment for gastrointestinal function. So when you have a colonoscopy, we're looking at the surface to see if anything looks abnormal on the surface that would indicate cancer or perhaps colitis, inflammation, and there may be some targeted biopsies done. If we see polyps, we would remove them. And that's the extent to which a colonoscopy investigates the gastrointestinal system. In functional medicine, we have a different type of test that we do that gives us a functional assessment of the gastrointestinal system. So we can look at its metabolism, its metabolic functions to see if they are normal or not normal, and then that can be targeted. So when we come back from this first commercial break, we'll talk about the type of testing that is more valuable in terms of cancer prevention, that really looks deep into the gastrointestinal system. So you can know if you are allowing, the good foods and the variety of foods that you eat and drink to actually get through into the cells. So we'll be right back after this commercial break. Thank you for listening.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RIOBE integrativemedicine.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
Join Dr. Bernie Siegel on Mind Health Matters every Thursday and Friday, 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Bernie will draw from his inspirational personal journey, offering us special nuggets of his sacred wisdom weaved through his delightful stories. Listen in as Bernie reminds us to be fully engaged in life.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
Looking for a fun and relaxing getaway? Omega Rest and Rejuvenation Retreats are a great way to unwind and renew your spirit. Sit and read in the garden, explore the woodland trails, or try a daily yoga or meditation class. You can stretch your body, quiet your mind, and do as much or as little as you choose. Located in Rhinebeck, New York, just 90 miles north of New York City, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
We're back.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so it looks like we have some questions. Thank you from our listeners. So how do I know I have a tummy issue? Something I should look out for? Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So they can vary, but bloating is probably one of the biggest ones. You know, if you feel bloated after meals or bloated for no reason, like a gassy bloating, that's usually a sign of a gastrointestinal issue. Any type of nausea, heartburn, certainly loose stools, constipation, and my patients often ask, well, how often should I move my bowels? You know, they think sometimes moving their bowels like a couple times a week is normal because that's what they've always experienced. And so you should move your bowels every single day, perhaps up to 3 times is considered normal as long as they are well formed. So nausea, bloating tend to be the more common ones. Heartburn's a big one. And those are usually indications of that you're not absorbing your food properly or that there's an infection in the small intestine in particular, which is almost never tested because it's really hard to reach that area. So when you have your colonoscopy, they never get up that far. And if you have an upper endoscopy where they're putting a camera down through into the stomach, they don't go past the stomach very far. And so that whole area of the small intestine never is evaluated. In the field of integrative medicine, we use a breath test. So you literally blow into a tube and we look for certain gases that are formed by bacteria. Shouldn't have many bacteria in the small intestine. And so if the gases exceed a certain threshold, that's diagnostic of a small bowel infection. What's critical about a small bowel infection is the small bowel or the small intestine is where you absorb your nutrients, right? So in going back to how do I prevent cancer, the specific area that has to be normal is your small intestine. And so you'd want to know whether or not you have an infection in the small intestine. If you have a gastrointestinal symptom, it's estimated that 70% of people, children and adults alike, who have a gastrointestinal symptom have a small bowel infection. And if you have a small bowel infection, that means you're not absorbing your nutrients. That doesn't mean you're not absorbing any nutrients, right? Because the small intestine is pretty long. It's about 5 or 6 feet. And so, if the area where you're supposed to absorb B12 is inflamed, you'll have a B12 deficiency. If the area you're supposed to absorb, zinc is inflamed, you'll have a zinc deficiency. And so that's what dictates what deficiencies you have, is where along the gut you have the inflammation from the infection. So that's a great question. And that's something that can only really be answered through the field of integrative medicine, unfortunately. Another great question, does avoiding meat help me stay healthier? That's a very personal question. So that depends, right? If you have high acidity in your system, so one thing we look for when we do a tongue and pulse assessment in Chinese medicine is if someone has a red tongue, if your tongue looks like my shirt, you should not be eating meat because meat is a highly acidic food. Now, most of our foods are acidic, right? And so we're not going to avoid acid, but you want to avoid high acid if you are already acidic. And so you should avoid red meat and gamey meat if you are acidic. If you're not acidic, then you can eat red meat safely. Again, using the guidelines that we talked about earlier, it's got to be a clean protein source. Let's see what else. Does spirituality play a strong part in healing my body? It's the strongest part, frankly, right? The more difficult one to get to, but the most potent one is spirituality. What I think,
Sorry.
we good? Sorry. All right. Yeah. So because a lot of our function and our thoughts are subconscious, it's a little bit difficult to bypass everything through the use of spirituality alone. So spirituality is the most critical point, but fixing the body is equally critical. So the two have to meet in the middle, in my opinion, but spirituality plays a huge and the most important role in keeping the body healthy, because it is the spirit that controls the body. But if the body is off kilter and our ego starts to come into play, and our subconscious fears start to come into play, then it blocks the spirit from, coming down, and that's what leads to disease ultimately. So absolutely, you need to go from both directions, always with a good spiritual practice, and also looking at the body from a different perspective that allows, I can hear the scratchy sounds myself now, so hopefully that's better. And that will allow the body and the mind and the spirit to align. And that's what will give you, optimal health. So that's a great question too. I'm in my 60s. Is it too late to change my fate? No, absolutely not. You can make huge improvements in a relatively short period of time if you know what improvements to make, right? So you need the data, you need the information of what's going on in your cells in order to correct them. So, I tell people, we don't know where you are on a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum from, birth and perfect health, so to speak, to death. And when you walk into the office for an evaluation, we don't know where you are on that spectrum, right? And there's all kinds of symptoms in between, and then diseases, and then ultimately, death at the end, right? And so we don't know where you are in that spectrum. And it's very difficult to tell. And once you undergo an integrative program, I tell people it's like trying to, slow down a cruise ship and make a 180-degree turn, or a freight train, right? It doesn't happen instantaneously, but it definitely happens, right? So as long as you're taking the right steps, you're going to slow down the freight train or the cruise ship, and eventually you will turn it around. Now, we don't know where on the spectrum you are. And the sooner we start to slow down the freight train, the faster you'll be able to turn and head back towards really good optimal health. But there is no limit as to when you can start a program like this or how successful it will be. The only thing that really determines how successful it will be is just a commitment, really. There's a lot of homework and things to do, meditation practices, diet, exercise. So there's a whole plan to execute consistently, with commitment. And as long as that is done, it doesn't really matter what age you are when you start the process. So that's another great question. Thank you for that one. How do I make an appointment at your office? Okay. Yeah. So I am the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. And our number is area code 561-244-5880. And our email address is info@Riobe, that's RIOB as in boy, E as in Edward, integrativemedicine.com. So thank you for that. Let's see. Have injuries over the years that lead to more chance of getting cancer? I guess I would need to know injuries, where, what injuries in particular do you mean there? Sun exposure, good or bad? Limited sun exposure, good. Excessive sun exposure, bad. The important thing with sun exposure is if you're trying to get vitamin D, your core has to be exposed to the sun. And of course, there's a lot of controversy as to whether the sunscreens we use are dangerous in and of themselves. And again, it also depends kind of where you're from genetically, right? So if you're very fair skinned, you want to be very careful with sun exposure, limiting it to maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes of sun exposure will give you a ton of vitamin D, 10 or 20,000 units of vitamin D just from 20 minutes of core sun exposure. So exposing just your arms and your legs is not going to be sufficient to get vitamin D and all the other benefits of the sun. Another benefit of the sun is infrared light, and that's in particular at dawn and dusk. And we can see that, right? At sunrise, there's a bit of a red hue, and then at sunset, there's a bit of a red hue in the sky where the sun is, and that's because of the infrared waves that are coming from the sun. So if you want to get infrared healing from the sun, that's dawn and dusk. And that's going to be the safest time to have sun exposure is at dawn and dusk because it's not high up in the sky and not quite as intense. And so that's what I would recommend for sun exposure. Just not very much, 20 minutes max would be my recommendations. Yes, x-rays and mammograms. Yeah, we were going to talk about that as another cause of cancer, right? So when we look at, well, what toxins cause cancer? Like, what do I need to avoid to reduce my risk of cancer? An x-ray will increase your risk of cancer by 1 or 2%. Pesticides will increase your risk of cancer by about 3%. And that was one of the defenses of Roundup. They're like, well, our active ingredient only increased the risk of cancer 1.3. I can't remember the number that they quoted anymore, percent. So that's not what causes cancer, right? And unfortunately, all of the toxins will have that story. They'll say, well, ours only increases your risk by 1 or 2%. Well, when you add up all those 1s and 2%, you end up with 100% eventually, right? If you have that bad strawberry and you're eating, meats with hormones and, foods that are not organic, and you're getting, your annual mammograms and, maybe you need a wrist x-ray, you have back pain, so now you're getting an x-ray on your back. You got to go get your teeth evaluated and you're having x-rays in your mouth. That's 1% each time. CAT scans have some exposure associated with them. Our household toxins, right? And again, Roundup has a 3% perhaps chance of increasing cancer. But when you add to that, the lotions you're putting on your skin, the makeup you put on your face, the cleaning products you're using, they each have like a 1% increase. And so before you know it, you have a 200% chance of cancer, right? If you add them all up. And so there's not one thing that we can say, well, that causes cancer and that causes cancer. It's the cumulative effect, right? And mammograms are part of standard of care for early diagnosis of breast cancer. And so, it is standard of care. So we can't really say, well, don't go get mammograms. But if you do get your mammograms, avoid other things that are unnecessary, right? You want to make sure that you clean up as many of those little percentages as possible so that you reduce the overall burden and load over time. And that's the only way, right? It's chiseling away at each 1% that actually helps you prevent cancer. So we're strengthening the body from the inside by making sure that we have the right nutrients so we can get tested for nutrient deficiency. So once we know whether or not we have a gut issue, we begin to fix whatever gut issue we have. So if we have enzyme deficiencies, we start to take enzymes so that we can absorb better. If we have malabsorption due to an infection, we treat the infection. And we take enzymes to speed up our absorption as we're waiting for the infection to clear up and the inflammation to go down. If we need probiotic support or prebiotic support based on the testing that's available in integrative medicine, we would prescribe prebiotics or probiotics or both to correct whatever we find in the testing that's abnormal. So that's the advantage of integrative medicine is we can know exactly what's going on in the gut and begin to systematically correct it. So that's the inside out part of prevention. The outside in part of prevention is reducing the toxic burden in your home in particular. So going to organic pest control products, going looking at the electromagnetic radiation in your home coming from your smart meters, your Wi-Fi, your cell phones, your computers, all of these things. There are EMF blockers that you can purchase. There are EMF meters that you can purchase or rent that will scan your home, tell you where your hot spots are, and you blunt them with EMF blockers. It's looking at all of your cleaning products, going to eco-friendly sources. And again, the Environmental Working Group has looked at a lot of cleaning products and different things to help you make better choices. So maybe not using the bleach and going to peroxide is a better choice, right? Maybe using peppermint oil instead of the guy that comes around with the toxic fumes to kill the bugs. Maybe using thyme oil and different things. So nature has all that we need in itself. We just have to go back to what it had intended for us all along. Using peroxide in your pool instead of chlorine, so all of these things add up. So if you look at each individual thing, they'll all say, it's not us. We only have a 1% or 2%. It's not us. We're not the ones causing cancer. And that is true. They are not alone causing cancer. It's the cumulative effect of all of them together that causes the cancer and breaks the camel's back. So for us, in turn, when we want to reduce toxic load, we have to look at every single cleaning product and say, is there a better choice out there for me? And do our due diligence to find out if there is. We have to look at our food and say, is there a better choice for me? And then buy those things, right? And yes, they cost a little more, that's true. But there's monetary costs, and then there's quality of life cost, right? For me, quality of life is always more valuable than money. And so if I have to pay $7 for the strawberries, I'd rather pay the $7 for the organic strawberries than the $4 for the non-organic strawberries, and then end up with a problem later, right? Same thing with the meats. I'd rather get organic, grass-fed, grass-finished meat than regular meat, because I know that although I'm spending more money now, I'm saving money later, right? And so we have to really get a wide angle when we're looking at prevention. Otherwise, it doesn't seem worth it. So we have to really understand, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because every little thing that comes at me increases my risk by 1%, but I have control over every single one of them. And it's my choice as to whether I let it in my environment or not. And so that's the best way to prevent, cancer, is by looking at all of those little things. And as you're running out of one particular product, go Google eco-friendly products through the Environmental Working Group, or there are other sites as well. And they'll give you better options, and you look at the ingredients in those other options and see if you think it's a viable option for you. Virus-caused cancer. Yes, so viruses can cause cancer. That's another, toxin, so to speak. So viruses are little bits of genetic code that invade the body of a susceptible host, and then they go and they merge with our own genetic code. So they interrupt our own genetic code, and that can cause cancer. So one of the more famous ones, human papillomavirus, as a cause of cervical cancer. And so when we get infected with human papillomavirus, it will blend in to our own genetic code, disturb our own genetic code, and eventually potentially lead to cancer. There are certain high-risk types of HPV, human papillomavirus. And yes, there is a vaccine. That was another question. The human papillomavirus vaccines that are out for almost 20 years now. And so, yes, they can prevent infection with certain strains of human papillomavirus, with the intended outcome being the prevention of cervical cancer. And of course, any vaccine that anyone would want to get is a personal choice that you'd have to have with your physician. as to whether you want to get a vaccine or use other techniques to boost your immune system. So what a vaccine does is it boosts your immunity for one particular thing. Taking the right vitamins and minerals and eating properly and avoiding toxins seems like, the harder thing to do because there's so much to do, but that's how you avoid a lot more things. And we can't make vaccines for every possible disease and cancer. And so if we really, again, want to prevent all cancer, we have to really look at those basic lifestyle things that we do each and every day and reduce the burden bit by bit. So thank you. Those are all amazing questions. I appreciate them very much. And we're here live on Dream Vision 7 Radio, and we're about to take another commercial break, but please give us a call. Our number is 646-558-8656. We'll be right back.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RIOBE integrativemedicine.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
EDECIA is a U.S. nonprofit dedicated to the dream of ending childhood malnutrition for millions of children around the world through the manufacture of Plumpy Nut and other nutrient-rich, peanut-based, ready-to-use foods. EDECIA has already delivered life and hope to nearly 1 million children in over 26 developing countries. To find out how you can join EDECIA's dream of ending childhood malnutrition, please visit edeciaglobal.org.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe-Canavis, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Burke. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evening at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com. This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
We're back.
Thank you, Rachel. So thank you for joining me. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and this is Awakened Wellness live on Dream Vision 7 Radio. We had another question, I believe. When can women stop mammograms, I believe is the question. Is that right, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. And also looks like vaginal exams. So that's a tough question. There is no set guideline as to when to stop mammograms. And what I counsel my clients, and it depends on your personal risk. So if you've had a history of breast cancer, that's going to be very different than if you don't. If you have a high risk for breast cancer, then it's going to be different than if you don't. But what I tell people is when you would choose to do nothing about the potential diagnosis of cancer is when you stop your mammograms. When you would absolutely refuse treatment. So in other words, you don't even want to know if you have breast cancer because you're not going to do anything about it. That would be the time to stop the mammograms. I often have patients ask me, well, can I do something else? Do I have to keep, zapping my breasts every year? Now, we cannot formally recommend that you go and do something else. Thermograms have been FDA approved as what's called an adjunctive tool to a mammogram. So in other words, it can be used side by side with a mammogram. And what a thermogram is it's an infrared camera looking for temperature fluctuations across your skin. And in order for a tumor to develop, by definition, it has to draw blood vessels to itself. So once you have one cancer cell, it has to divide. And as it divides, it's using up a bunch of energy. It has to grow blood vessels to feed itself. And as more blood flows to an area, the temperature is going to rise. And thermographic cameras are that sensitive that they will detect the slightest temperature elevation across the skin from an underlying tumor. And so thermograms can be used as an adjunct. So, and it's a personal choice. We cannot make that recommendation that you substitute a thermogram for a mammogram, but they can be used side by side. The thermogram has an advantage over the mammogram in that if you have dense breasts, it's not as relevant with a thermogram because it's not an X-ray. So it doesn't get blocked by density. And so it's looking for temperature changes. And so if you have very dense breasts, it's not going to interfere with a thermogram like it does a mammogram. And also the thermogram, there's no trauma to the breast. So there's nothing actually physically touching you with a thermogram. And so that's a choice. And then there's what's called the Greek test out of Europe. So it's not, the lab is not located here in the United States, it's in Greece. But you can draw your blood here in the United States and send it to Greece. It's RGCC. They can detect tumors when they're about a couple millimeters, whereas the mammogram will detect a tumor typically when it's about a centimeter. Now we have 3D mammograms that are more sensitive, but still not to the point of the so-called Greek test. And so I hope that answers your question. There's no defined age. Pap smears, age 65 is typically the age. Cervical cancer is technically a sexually transmitted condition from typically human papillomavirus infection. So it tends to go down as women age, unlike other cancers, which tend to go up. And so 65 is typically the age at which we stop recommending pap smears, or when you've had a hysterectomy, as long as the hysterectomy was not for cervical cancer or uterine cancer. So if you had a hysterectomy for fibroids or something like that, you don't technically need a pap smear if your cervix was removed. So if they kept your cervix in at the time of hysterectomy, which is sometimes done in order to prevent bladder and fecal incontinence, so they'll just take the top of the uterus off, leave the cervix behind. So if you still have a cervix, you absolutely need to continue your pap smears until age 65. So I hope that answered that question. And let's see. Stopping vaginal exams, yes, it's a personal choice. Again, if you would not do anything from the findings of that pelvic exam, if you're absolutely clear, that I don't care what you find. I don't care if you tell me I have ovarian cancer. I don't care if you tell me I have cervical cancer. I don't care what you tell me. I am not going to treat it. Then you can stop having the vaginal exam. So if you're 85 years old and you would absolutely refuse treatment, then there's no point in having a pelvic exam, right? And so it's always a personal choice. We make recommendations, but it's your health, it's your body, it's your choice. So our job as physicians is to give you information, data, and then you can then make an informed decision, ask any questions you may have, do your diligent research, ask for resources. and make your choice, right? And our job is to respect your choice. That's basically what we should be doing. Now, we may be a little more firm in making sure you understand the risks of not doing a particular test, but ultimately it is your choice. And we ultimately have to respect it. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay, I think we're good. So what time is it? 12:54. Okay, so we have a little more time here. So getting back to gastrointestinal function, which is probably the most important thing. So what I was talking about earlier in answering the questions, we have tests that we do that pretty much line up whatever could potentially be problematic in terms of you absorbing your nutrients. And then following that, you'd want to know, well, what nutrient deficiencies do I actually have? And you can test for that as well. So you can test your immune system cells and get a full report of 33 different nutrients so that you know exactly what you're deficient in. And what you can do there is boost your nutrition, right? So if you're deficient in certain foods, you can then, deficient in certain vitamins, you can look up what foods contain those vitamins and you would add those to your diet, right? And you can take supplements, clean supplements. You always want to be under the guidance of someone who can really give you recommendations as to the cleanest possible supplements that you can take. And then spirituality, that's the key, right? So as a human being, we have an ego and then we have a spirit, and the ego is blocking the spirit. And so breathing, we talked about breathing in several podcasts, but that's probably the most important thing. Again, that's the language of the body, is your breath. So we think our thoughts are how we think, or how we communicate with the body, but it's actually our breath that communicates with the body on a cellular level. So yes, we talk to ourselves in our heads all day long, having thoughts, but it's actually the breath that we take that actually sends the signals down into the body. So your brain picks up on the breathing pattern. So if you have a calm, good, full breath, the brain picks that up and sends calm signals to the body. If you have a chest breath, your brain picks that up and sends fight or flight signals down to your body. And so really learning how to breathe. And I think the Heart Math Institute in Redwood, California, has the simplest techniques, certainly not the only technique. There are many, many wonderful techniques all around the world. But the Heart Maths is just quick, dirty, simple, and effective. It's a 3-minute breathing technique. So I encourage you to go to heartmath.org and take a look. They have an app that you can that you can download. You don't have to purchase it. It's free. And then there's also a biofeedback sensor that you would purchase from them directly. And it's kind of self-explanatory. You turn on the app and you have a voice basically walk you through the entire process of how to breathe. And it's invaluable, and so that's how we take all the static off the line to allow the spirit to really control the body, right? When we look at the body is a tool, just like a kitchen knife or a pair of scissors or our phones or tools. The body is a tool that should be constantly under our control. And when we allow the ego to take over, that's us allowing the body to control us instead of us controlling the body. So heart math and breathing puts the heart back in control of the body, which is really our spirit. And then that allows the ego to fall away over time. You have to make a committed, consistent practice out of it. But it allows the ego to fall away. And so that takes the static off the line to allow the spirit to really control the body and not have the body controlling you. So when we look at the ego, it's a physical structure coming out of our brain. So that's the body literally controlling us. So, and that's something we actually allow. So we can just flip the switch and not allow that anymore by using techniques that will work to bring the heart back under as the commander of the body. So that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much for all the incredible questions. That was wonderful. And I wish you many, many blessings until we meet again. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and thank you for listening. See you next time.
Join us next time on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, to learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness. Awakened Wellness airs every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern of each month. Meanwhile, you can join our Facebook page at facebook.com/awakenedwellness and let us know what you'd like to discuss on future episodes. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RiobeIntegrativeMedicine.com. This show is part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.